In this lesson, we're going to show you how you can create a ribbon effect with your lettering. There are several different ways to do this. Actually, there's lots of different ways, but we're going to talk about how to do it based on brush calligraphy. So if you have a brush pen and then a monoline pen to add some outlines, those are the only supplies you really need to get started. So you can see in this video the difference between what it would look like if you just outline your brush calligraphy versus if you add the ribbon effect. So there is some outlining involved, but we also need to pay close attention to where these outlines are being drawn. Plus, we'll add in some extra details like shadows to make it look even more realistic. So let's start with just the basic shapes that we can find in our letters. So we have an underturn, which comes down and then back up. We have an overturn, which starts by going up and then curves down. The compound curve goes up, down, up. Then we have an oval that goes down and back up. We have our ascending stem loop, which goes up and then straight down, and our descending stem loop, which goes down and straight back up, curving upward. So if we take a look at what an actual ribbon would look like in some of these shapes, there are several different ways that some of these curves can happen. So for this underturn, we can either have the ribbon curve back up over itself, so this part is in the back and then this last part is in the front, or we could have this part that comes down in the front and then the curve ends in the back. I personally like the look of this better. I like to emphasize the downstrokes as being in the front and this upstroke as being in the back. So if we look at the difference between just outlining letters and making them into a ribbon effect, the biggest thing besides the shadows is that this black outline, instead of just going around the letters, is cutting through them. So you can see here, like for this R, this black part comes straight through here. And that's because we're mimicking the look of this ribbon. So in this ribbon, when it comes down, you can see that the right edge of it is cutting through right here. So even though for a ribbon, the thickness of it is the same throughout, like this part is as thick as this part, for lettering, usually your upstrokes are thin. So I'm going to continue doing that with my lettering. But if you wanted to make all of your strokes the same width, just like a regular ribbon would, you could totally do that too. Okay, but going back to this, so we have the reason that we can tell that this ribbon is folded versus just being outlined like this is because we can see the clearly defined edge, and then we can also see some shadows going on. So looking at this underturn, it's the same shape in the bottom part of the R as it is in the I. We have it right here too. So mimicking what a ribbon looks like, we're going to trace the right edge here, and instead of coming back up around the outline like we do for the U, we're just going to cut straight through it. So I'm just going to go straight down like that. Okay? And you can make this a slight curve if you want to make it look more flowy, or if you want to make it look a little bit more defined, you can make it just go straight down. Either way works, as long as you're cutting through this color. Okay, so then I'm going to finish that downstroke piece like this, and I'm actually just going to outline all of the downstrokes right now because just to make them stand out a little more. So if we look at a ribbon that curves over top like this, then we can see that the left edge of it, so if we want the downstroke to be in front, then the left edge of this is defined. So I'm going to do that here. So I'm going to start at the top and just cut through like this and just outline it. And I like to try to make mine a little bit flatter on the tops and bottoms, or you could do it curved again if you want it to be more flowy. Okay, so then for this compound curve, we're going to, so there's a couple ways you could make the fabric look if you were having it curve over itself multiple times. So we could come up, down, and up, which would look like this. So each time we do it, the ribbon is folding behind itself. So up, and then it goes behind itself, and then behind itself again. Or it could be the opposite, where it goes up, and then when it comes down, it folds on top of itself. And then when it comes back up, it folds on top of itself again. But I want all of my downstrokes to be in front. So instead of going up, folding on top of itself, and then folding it on top of itself again, I'm going to have this piece, this upstroke, if you will, go behind it so that the down part is what's in the front, and then these back pieces are not. Okay, so with that, basically this is just a combination of our overturn. So we have the left edge here cutting through, and the left edge here, and then our underturn where the right edge cuts through. So I like to do like this, and then like that. Okay. The oval is a little bit tricky to do with a ribbon, but with the same idea of keeping the downstroke in front, we're going to cut through from here all the way down to the bottom like this. Okay, so I'm going to finish outlining these so that you can see what it'll end up looking like. So I'm just going to outline it and stop wherever I've already drawn a black stroke. Try your best to outline it as close to the edge as possible. If you want, sometimes, like I said, I like to make the curves a little bit flatter than normal at the tops and bottoms. Like you can see, the bottom of this B is pretty straight. Okay, and then for my oval, it'll look like that. Okay, and then lastly we have our ascending and descending loops. So if I want this downstroke to be in the front, basically we're going to cut through the right side right here. So I just want to always emphasize my downstrokes. And then I can make the top a little bit flatter and continue tracing just like this. And then here, if I want my downstroke to stay in front, I'm just going to bring this line all the way down. Like that. Okay, so then the next step is going to be adding the shadows. So anywhere that the ribbon is behind, we're going to add a shadow, and that's just like whenever light blocks something, that's where the shadow appears, is behind it. Okay, and it's always going to be darkest, closest to the fold. So since I'm using these brush pens, this is a Zig brushable, and the color is pretty buildable. First, what I like to do, since I know that all of my thin strokes are in the back, since I'm bringing all my downstrokes in the front, my thin strokes must be in the back. So I'm just going to go over all of my thin strokes, maybe once or twice, just to darken them up a little bit. And this is after I outline them. And then you can either use, if you're using one brush pen that has one color, you can go back and do this next part with the same color. I'm using, this brushable is, I've been using the lighter end, but it also has a darker end of the same color. So I'm going to go right up next to the fold and just add a little bit more of a dark color here. And if you have a blending pen, you can use a blending pen or a paintbrush or something to blend out this shadow to make it a little bit more natural. I'm not going to do that. I think it looks fine how it is, or what you could do is, if you're using two colors like this, you could go back in with a lighter color and just go over that edge just to soften it a little bit like this. So these shadows are what's going to make it start to look a little bit more 3D. So one other little thing that you can add is, if you have a white pen, this is a white jelly roll, you could just add a little bit of white highlight to the areas that are in the front, because these are going to be catching the most light. I just like to do a really quick little thin white line just at the top of those strokes like that, and that kind of makes it pop a little bit more. Totally not necessary, but something that you could try if you wanted. Okay, so now we're going to talk about putting these together to form letters and words. So if I were to just follow what my basic stroke said, then first I would do my oval. And I'm just going to do exactly how I have it on my sheet over there. Without adding the shadows yet. I always add the shadows at the end. Okay, and then I have my underturn, and I would have to make it, I guess, like this. But that you could do it like that. I think it looks a little bit strange because I'm trying to emphasize my downstrokes and keep all of those in the front. So if I have it like this, then it looks like my thin part of my oval is in front of this part of the underturn. So if I ever see a thin stroke and a thick stroke overlap, I always want my thick stroke to be the one that's in the front or the one that's emphasized. So what I'm going to do here is do my underturn first, so that it's overlapping that side of the oval. And then I can go back in and do my oval and just stop before I run through that underturn. And that makes such a big difference with making it look like the downstrokes are in front. I definitely prefer the look of this one to this one. Okay, so that's just something to keep in mind as you're writing letters, to keep the downstrokes emphasized, even if that means adjusting the way that your basic strokes are created. Okay, so I'm going to look for where my downstrokes need to be emphasized. Again, if there's any downstrokes that overlap, I want the downstroke to be in front. So since we didn't actually have S as a basic stroke, I'm just going to think about, okay, so if my downstroke is going to be in front, and then here it's going to cut through that piece right there. And I'm going to stop here. I'm not going to keep following that line because I want my downstroke to be in front. So then let's go back up to the top, come down, and it's going to cut through right there. So then I would just finish off tracing my thin strokes. Okay, so then rather than doing this piece first, since I know that I want this edge to be very defined, since this is a downstroke, I'm going to do this one first, and then go back in and add my thin strokes. Okay. Or what I did here was different than this, where I continued on, and then I'm trying to stop exactly where this piece is going to end, but let's see how that looks. Okay, so I might have to touch that up a little bit by just finishing that line and that line. You can just outline the dots of your I's and J's. Okay, so then to keep this in the front, I can refer back to my basic strokes. So I'm going to cut this through at the top right here. And then the bottom is actually the same as an underturn. Like that. So you could take the approach of outlining all of your thick strokes first. Okay, so here I have two thick strokes that kind of come together. I'm thinking about how I want this to look. If I want it to look like this top arm is a little bit more on top, or the bottom arm. I think I want the bottom one to stand out a little bit more, so I'm going to, this is basically a compound curve right here. And then I'll do this one at the end. Okay, and just make sure everything else is outlined. Like that. So if you wanted to, you could be done right here. I just think that adding in the shadows makes it look even more three-dimensional because you're making the parts that are in the back darker. So here I'm taking the darkest color and going right up next to the folds. And as I go, I'm going to use my other lighter color to blend it out a little bit. just going over the thin strokes. So none of my thick strokes are going to get any extra shading unless they happen to be, so like this part of the S is behind, and I know it's a little bit thicker than the rest of my thin strokes, but I'm still going to leave it dark because I want it to look like it's behind this part of the S. Same thing with this part of the K, since it's partially behind this piece. I'm going to make it darker. Maybe if I had a better blending pen, then I wouldn't have made this darkness go all the way up to the top, more like this, just because this is thick at the top. It's just that this piece would have been in front of it, so there would have been a slight shadow. Okay, and then next I'm going to grab my white pen and add some details. Like that. All right, now I'm going to show you two more ways that you can do the outlines and shadows. So remember, for the style of lettering, I'm trying to keep my thin strokes a little bit thicker than normal, just so that it does appear looking like a ribbon. But for this one, okay, so I'm writing the words thin and none. You'll learn why in a second. Okay, so for my thin one, I'm going to create the outline, but instead of using my Tombow mono drawing pen, I'm going to use my Tombow twin tone. So this is going to give a thinner outline, and also this is purple instead of black. So it's going to be a little bit more of a subtle outline, and let's just see how it looks. Okay, so you can see that this thin outline gives a very different appearance than the thicker one. It's a little bit more subtle. And now I'm going to show you how it would look if you did no outline at all. So instead of outlining these, so the outline is great because it helps you figure out exactly where to put the shadow and everything, but without doing an outline, you can still add the shadows. It's just a little bit trickier to figure out exactly where to put them. So I'm going to just shade. So I'm making sure that I'm not going over any of my downstrokes. I'm just going to shade right along the edge of where those little cut lines would be that we've talked about. Okay, so there we have it. We have our shadows. So if we just took away the outline of this, then it would look pretty similar to what this looks like. We just don't have the outlines that are defining the edge of the ribbon. So that was an overview of how to do ribbon lettering. So just remember a couple things to always emphasize the downstroke. So I like to outline the downstroke part of these letters first, then go back in and outline the thin part and then add my shading. You can use the basic strokes to help you figure out how to create the letters. If you do have some overlapping pieces, always do the downstroke first. And then you can also experiment with different ways to do it, such as not using an outline at all, using a thin outline, using a different color outline. You can even use a different color shadow. Whatever you want to do, try it out, see what works best for you. You can add highlights and other details as well. Maybe you could even add like a pattern to the ribbon if you wanted, or like a stripe down the middle, or some other sort of pattern. But just remember that if part of the ribbon is overlapping itself, then one piece is going to be darker and have a shadow on it, and the other piece is going to be lighter and in the front. Let me know what you thought of this tutorial. I would absolutely love to see pictures of your work that you've created from this tutorial, and thanks so much for watching. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up button below and be sure to subscribe so that you can see more videos just like this. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.